Years ago in Newtown, a group of friends of mine and I started something called the Peace Builders. They're 11 to 14-year-olds, and we were just growing together, after the big tragedy that we had at Sandy Hook Elementary. So our motto was, don't be a lizard. Don't be a lizard. Be a human. Be a human. What does that mean? Well, I'm a neuropsychiatrist, so I think in terms of the brain and in terms of brain development. Turns out the brain kind of looks like this lollipop, and you can't see it so well, but you know how they go. It's got a stem, it's got that chocolatey center, and in this one it's kind of mushed up, and then it's got the hard candy on the outside. Brain is very similar. Brain's got a stem, the brain stem. It's got a middle part of the brain, scientifically called the midbrain. Big surprise. And the outside is called the cortex, the cerebrum, the cortex. Cortex means bark, so it literally is like the bark of the brain. Now, why would I say don't be a lizard? Well, because of the function of these three parts of the brain. The brain stem, that part of our brain, is part of the brain that we have in common with every other animal. And in particular, it's the only brain that reptiles have, or almost the only brain, is the part of the brain that is responsible for everything automatic. Heart rate, body temperature, respirations, anything that you don't have to think about. Reptiles don't have a lot of cortex, so they're not able to think a lot, because the cortex, this hard candy part of the brain, reptiles don't have a very big one of those. Humans have a big cortex. So do dolphins and whales, interestingly. Anyway, the reptiles, the lizards, they act on instinct. Something happens and they just act automatically. They don't think things out or plan things so much because they don't have a cortex to do that. Well, it turns out in our brain, the reptilian part of our brain, the lizard part of our brain, is also responsible for the fight or flight response, where we react to something that's scary, something that we feel threatened by, with an urge to run like crazy, to flee, or to fight, right? To fight the lion that's chasing us. So this idea that there is a part of the brain that coordinates automatic responses to help us survive a threat, kind of like a fire alarm in the high school. You're taking your math test and the fire alarm goes off. It's more important than anything else because your survival is more important than the math test, right? So when the fight or flight response goes off and our brainstem shuts off everything else north of that, the midbrain and the cortex, or they don't work at their best, they work in service of survival, right? They're subjugated, they're made the servants of the brainstem, so that everything we perceive, we're thinking it might be a threat, and that we have to act to get away from it. And then the midbrain, that's the part of the brain that handles many things, but for our purposes, emotion and memory. So if we're in the fight or flight response, what emotion would be best if we had to fight that lion? Anger, right? So when we're in the fight or flight response, we might be accusing our spouse of something that they didn't think or say, or we might get angry at them in a kind of a snappy way, or maybe just be grumpy in general, right? Or we may be anxious about everything, because if you have to run from that lion, the best emotion to do that, where you're focused and not thinking about all the beautiful scenery, the best emotion for fleeing is fear. So fear and anger are the primary emotions of the fight or flight response. And then they act on the cortex. The cortex is where we do all of our high-level thinking. We perceive things, we give meaning to what we perceive, we think about things, we relate it to our memories, we come up with plans to support. Well, if our whole brain is structured around survival, then everything looks kind of like a threat. What did that guy mean when he said that? Or did I say the right thing and am I in trouble now? So everything looks a little scary or a little bit like it's upsetting, pissing you off a little bit. So this means the brainstem is in control, not the cortex, right? So the reason the Peace Builders had a motto of "Don't be a lizard" is don't be controlled by your brainstem, right? Recognize when you're in fight or flight, calm yourself down, activate your cortex so that you can think, you can bring out the best of you. Now, let's talk about the cortex a little bit. When the cortex is free to operate without being overwhelmed by the brainstem's survival impulses, when it can just do its thinking job, well, that's when creativity happens. That's when we put things together in new ways. That's when we innovate. That's when we see nuances in each other's character that is exciting to us and appealing. It's where art comes from. It's where science and invention comes from. It's where the best of community comes from. It's where our best work in the world comes from. That's all in the cortex. Now, I'm going to show you how in my psychiatric practice, my neuropsychiatric practice, I use a device called a transcranial magnetic stimulator to quiet down the brainstem and wake up the cortex. You're probably wondering what this is and what I'm doing to myself. Well, this is a transcranial magnetic stimulator, and it's sending a magnetic pulse into my brain. And when you do it on this side of the brain with this special kind of magnetic pulse, this wavelength and this frequency, it has the effect of quieting down the brainstem, of making you more relaxed. You know, we live in a culture where everyone's in fight or flight all the time, it seems, with the craziness going on in the political world and just the general nuttiness. So we're all working on overdrive with our brainstems. And as a result, the thinking part of our brain, the part of our brain that can feel happy and fulfilled, that's the other side, doesn't get a chance because we're always in fight or flight mode. So this fancy machine is helping my brain quiet down my brainstem. And then in a minute, I'm going to do a stimulating treatment on this side to wake up my cortex. All of this is to show that this, I think, is the work of the time we're in, to quiet down our brainstems so we're not all in fight or flight mode all the time. Okay, here we go with the other side. This is transcranial magnetic stimulation, and this magnetic coil is sending a pulse into my brain to wake up the cortex, wake up the best part of my brain, to open up all the potential the brain has. In the last video, I did the treatment on that side. That quieted down my brainstem, the fire alarm system of the brain, where the fight or flight mechanisms that keep us anxious, looking for threats, maybe being a little grumpy or a little bit angry or anxious or fearful. Quieting that part of the brain down allows me now to really wake up all the best parts of my brain. That's what this is. But you know, I'm showing you this not just to show off my toy, which is very cool, but the reason I'm showing you this is because I think this is the job we all have right now at this time in history. We need to quiet down the fear and the anger and that brainstem reaction. And we need to be waking up the best parts of ourselves. There's all sorts of ways to do that. You can have a fancy toy like this, but prayer and meditation and community and loving kindness and the arts and nature, all of these things wake up the cortex. Now, when I've had a chance to do TMS on my patients, they'll find that they have abilities they didn't know they had. When we quiet down the brainstem and they're not so anxious or angry or reactive all the time, they start to see things they didn't see before because the cortex is awake, it's more alert, and it can start to function. It's like you wake up parts of the brain that had been asleep or put aside because everything was working to support the brainstem's fight or flight response. So people will tell me, yeah, I saw this beautiful thing on on my walk and I heard this person say something, or I felt something for my husband or my wife that I'd never felt before, or I was able to see this insight into this relationship, that it didn't upset me. So in other words, their capacity is widening because they're waking up parts of their brain that had been dormant because they had been stuck in a cycle of the brainstem, looking for threats, being angry, being fearful. It's very exciting. So clinically, it's fantastic for anxiety, for depression, many, many things. It's very exciting. But the point is, to heal the heart of America, we have to get out of our brainstem, individually, in families, in communities, in the country. We have to get away from the language of threat, perceiving it, seeing differences of opinion as being threatening. We want to open up the capacity of our brains for each other and with each other. Now, all this dormant capacity in the brain has been beautifully likened to gems in a mine, just waiting to be dug out, to be mined, to be brought out. Right? And so we need a new kind of education where we help each other bring out the best in each other. First, by calming down the brainstem, not being threatening to each other, using ways of communicating that aren't putting each other down or trying to dominate, and so that the cortex can take over, and these beautiful qualities of your nature can come to the surface and start to be used in productive and creative and prosperity creating ways. So these gems of capacity that you have is really at the core of healing the heart of humanity, healing the heart of America, and of course healing the heart of humanity. Because this is what I call our dignity, the sum total of all of these capacities, these latent, maybe even asleep capabilities that we have that are dormant or that we don't value or we don't recognize. They're just sitting there waiting to be used. It's like a Ferrari that's being used as a house planter, right? It's a nice looking house planter, but wait till you see what it can do if you drive it on the highway. Similarly, the brain is great if you want to survive, threats and put somebody down. It can do that. But wait till you see what it can really do. Those gems are at the core of healing the heart of America. Recognizing them, cultivating them, refining them, sharing them with each other, building a society, building the foundations of democracy based on human dignity. So thank you to my brain model here. And before the plane gets any louder, I'll see you in the next video. That's it for today's episode of The Science of Hope, on the role of science, technology, and critical thinking to help us grow together as a country. Get a healthy dose of upliftment and mind expansion every Thursday with more episodes of The Science of Hope, which is brought to you by Healing the Heart of America, where every day we have a different theme to bring unity to the country. Let us know what you think. What questions are on your mind? Get a conversation going in your community, or start with a comment below. Let's build a growing network of those committed to democracy and to a better future for our kids. Follow the conversation on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and on healingtheheartofamerica.com. I'm your host, Dr. John Woodall, reminding you, we need each other.